She vanished on the happiest day of her life. Hours after saying, "I do," a young bride in a lace-white gown disappeared into the night, leaving behind a shattered family, a frantic groom, and an entire town frozen in disbelief. What began as a celebration of love ended as one of the most disturbing murder cases investigators had ever seen, because the killer wasn't QT, a stranger lurking in the shadows. It was someone close, someone trusted, someone who stood just steps away from the groom as he said his vows. Her name was Claire Donovan. At 27, she had the kind of smile that made people pause mid-conversation, the kind of laugh that carried across a room. Born and raised in a small town in Illinois, Claire had grown up the daughter of a schoolteacher and a postal worker. She was smart, organized, and fiercely loyal to the people she loved. Friends remember her as the one who would show up at midnight with soup when you were sick, or who'd sit for hours helping you rewrite a resume. After college, she became a pediatric nurse, a career she loved for its purpose. And then came Michael Barrett. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with an easy confidence that masked the fact he had grown up in a broken home. Michael was steady, reliable, the kind of man Claire's parents quietly approved of. They met at a hospital fundraiser, and by the end of the night were inseparable. After 3 years together, Michael proposed on a snowy evening, kneeling in the frost while Claire's family looked on from the porch. It seemed like a perfect story, the kind of romance that made people believe in fate. The wedding was set for May, at a historic barn on the outskirts of town. Guests drove in from surrounding states. Flowers were arranged in blush and ivory, and fairy lights twinkled across wooden beams. The photographer captured Claire in her gown, her hair pinned in loose curls, Michael in his navy suit smiling as if nothing in the world could ever go wrong. But beneath the surface of this picture-perfect day, something dark was waiting to erupt. Among the guests was Michael's longtime best friend, Jason Miller. The two had known each other since high school. Football teammates, drinking buddies, brothers in everything but blood. Jason was the loud one, the life of the party, the man everyone said could light up a room. But those who looked closer noticed something else, an intensity in his eyes, a kind of restless energy, as though he was never fully at ease in his own skin. Jason had struggled with jobs, drifting from one to the next, often leaning on Michael for help. And though no one said it aloud, some suspected Jason carried feelings for Claire that went far beyond friendship. The reception was lively. Glasses clinked, music played, guests danced. Claire and Michael shared their first dance as husband and wife to a soft country song, their arms wrapped tightly around each other. But sometime near midnight, the joy began to unravel. Witnesses later recalled that Claire stepped outside for air. She was seen chatting briefly with Jason near the parking lot, her dress glowing under the string lights. Minutes later, she was gone. At first, no one noticed. It was a wedding, after all. People moved in and out, heading to the restrooms, stepping out for cigarettes. Michael assumed his bride was mingling or freshening up. But after 20 minutes stretched into an hour, unease began to ripple. When Michael asked around, no one knew where Claire had gone. Her purse was left inside. Her phone was abandoned. She hadn't taken her car keys. By 2 a.m., panic had replaced celebration. Guests spread out across the property, calling her name into the darkness. The barn echoed with silence now. The music cut off. The joy evaporated. Michael dialed 911 with trembling hands. "My wife is missing," he said. "She disappeared." Police arrived quickly. They scoured the grounds, questioning guests, searching nearby woods with flashlights. But Claire had vanished into thin air. For a bride to disappear on her wedding night, still in her dress, was almost unthinkable. Detectives immediately considered foul play. The next morning, the story exploded across the community. Local news crews camped outside the barn. Friends posted frantic messages on social media. "Help us find Claire." Hundreds volunteered to search fields and riversides. Helicopters circled overhead. Michael appeared on television, his face drawn and pale, pleading, "Please, if you know anything, bring Claire back." Behind the scenes, detectives began narrowing their list of suspects. Weddings are crowded, but investigators always start with the inner circle, the people closest to the victim. They interviewed Michael for hours, probing every detail of his relationship with Claire. But Michael's grief appeared genuine. His alibi checked out. He had been on the dance floor and with family during the crucial window. Attention shifted to Jason. Several guests recalled seeing him with Claire outside shortly before she vanished. At first, Jason brushed it off, saying they had exchanged a few words and parted ways. But detectives noted something odd. Jason seemed defensive, almost irritated, as if the questioning itself offended him. He insisted he had gone home immediately after the wedding, alone. 3 days later, searchers made a chilling discovery. In a shallow ditch less than 5 miles from the wedding barn, hidden under branches and mud, lay the body of Claire Donovan. Her dress was torn and soiled, her veil tangled in weeds. She had been strangled. The young bride who only hours earlier had been radiant with joy was now the victim of a brutal murder. The town reeled in shock. Candlelight vigils were held. Michael collapsed when he was told, and detectives turned their attention back to Jason. His alibi was thin. Cell phone records placed him near the ditch around the time Claire disappeared. Forensic teams discovered fibers from his car, S-trunk that matched the fabric of Claire Aisha's gown. And then came the most damning evidence: scratches on Jason's arms, consistent with defensive wounds. When confronted, Jason cracked. The story spilled out in fragments: anger, jealousy, a twisted sense of betrayal. He had been in love with Claire for years, silently watching her choose Michael. On the wedding night, drunk and spiraling, he cornered her outside. Witnesses later testified they heard raised voices, Claire insisting she needed to go back inside, Jason pleading, his words slurring. When she tried to walk away, he snapped. Jason strangled her in a sudden, violent rage, shoving her into his car, driving her into the night while music and laughter still echoed behind them. He dumped her body in the ditch, thinking it might buy him time, never realizing how quickly detectives would unravel his lies. The courtroom was packed when the trial began. Reporters lined the benches, sketch artists capturing every detail. Michael sat rigid in the front row, staring straight ahead, refusing to look at the man he had once called his best friend. Jason, pale and hunched, appeared far smaller than the loud, confident man people remembered. They played recordings of Jason's interrogation, his voice trembling as he shifted from denial to despair. The jury listened in silence, their faces grim. The defense tried to argue diminished capacity, pointing to Jason's intoxication and history of depression. But the facts were overwhelming. Witnesses described his fixation on Claire, his possessive behavior in the months leading up to the wedding. A bartender testified that Jason had downed 6 shots of whiskey that night, muttering about how he should have been the one marrying Claire. The climax came when Michael himself took the stand. His voice cracked as he described searching the grounds, calling his bride's name into the dark. "I trusted him," Michael said, pointing toward Jason. "He was supposed to be my brother, and he took everything from me." The jury deliberated for less than a day. They returned with a verdict of guilty, first-degree murder. Jason Miller was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Even with justice served, the case left deep scars. For Claire's parents, the loss was unbearable, a wound that never healed. For Michael, life became a shadow of what it might have been. The photographs from that night, the vows, the dances, the smiles, are frozen in time, haunting reminders of joy stolen too soon. And for the town, the case became a dark, cautionary tale. Evil does not always arrive in the form of a masked stranger or a distant threat. Sometimes it wears the face of a friend, standing right beside you on the happiest day of your life. Claire Donovan's story is one of love, betrayal, and the horrifying truth that the person you trust most can harbor the darkest secret. Her final chapter ended not with the music of a wedding dance, but with silence in a ditch on a lonely road. The last words of the prosecutor still echo. This was not the act of a stranger. This was the act of a man who could not stand to see happiness he could never have. And so the bride who vanished on her wedding night leaves behind a story that chills us to the core, a story that forces us to look closer at the people around us, wondering what darkness they might be hiding. Evil had been standing right beside the groom all along. If stories like this keep you hooked, hit subscribe for more.